So, do you want to talk through today a little bit, or you just want to jump in?
Do you, so we're talking about sustainable changes, lifestyle changes. You wrinkle your nose like,
No, I did. Sorry.
like you don't want to talk about this. Sustainable changes. Oh, geez. I'd rather just go on like a 1 week bender and.
Sorry. That's not how I felt at all, but I realized I was doing that. I was just kind of like I was reading our notes, and for some reason I made that face, and yeah.
I don't have our notes in front of me either.
Didn't mean to communicate.
Do I need to bring them? Yeah,
this
wrinkle.
topic
I can
sucks.
see you. I can see you.
Oh, crap. Hello, I am Michael Gray.
And I'm Erin Green.
And welcome to Middleish, a podcast about moderation in all things. How are you?
Hello. I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. You were going to say hello.
I was going to.
I keep cutting you off.
We're in perfect sync today. Perfect sync.
I'm just going to cut you off the whole episode. How's it going?
Very good.
Very good.
It's we had a couple days of rain, and that always gets to me, as much as I mean, it's summertime. It's kind of refreshing, and it keeps things green, but man, I've been dying for the sun, and it's out today.
Nice. And you have a new background.
I have a new background. I got a new desk, and I was telling Michael before we started recording that all of my stuff was kind of on this L-shaped, area back here. And then I got a new desk, and it's just like this one long piece. And then I realized at the beginning of the week when I started doing Zoom calls that I have nothing but just this white, like stark background. Looks like I'm in a prison or something. I was like, I guess we can't joke about that too much because of being locked inside our houses half the time.
Podcast from prison.
I know. At least I have crayons. I mean,
that's right.
I don't know if those would be allowed. You can't have pencils and pens, right? But crayons, they'd be okay.
I don't know.
I should ask Matt. Did you know that Matt used to be a jailer?
I was going to say, has he been to prison?
Well, he worked in a prison.
Did he really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's really funny to hear his stories because he'll just randomly be like, yeah, when I worked in the jail, and I'm like, it's so funny to hear him say that because,
I can't see him there.
When he tells stories, you'll see it. Like all of a sudden you'll be like, okay, it makes sense. And something he's always said that I think I admire the most, is he learned from the get-go of being a jailer that if you treat the inmates with respect as human beings, and you keep your word, and you really just treat them with respect, they'll usually reciprocate. And so he had this, I would say, a really valuable human experience from working at the jail, where you realize like how you treat people actually really matters, and how they treat you, instead of operating under this expectation that because they're incarcerated, they're going to, behave a certain way. If you expect them to behave, a little more humanely and honestly, they usually will. So, anyway, a little tangent, but I'll have to ask him if crayons are allowed.
Yeah. Just in case.
You never know.
Make some plans.
You can never be too prepared.
You really can't.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm good. I'm sure you're going to ask me, but I'm good.
Of course I was going to ask
if you. Care about that.
Yes, I do. Please tell me how you're doing, Michael. How is your day? How's your life?
It's going great. Yeah, it's been a good week so far. Nothing crazy. Just kind of a normal, ordinary week. Yeah, that's good. Things are good. Trying to think if there's anything significant that happened recently. I don't think so. Just kind of plugging along. Yeah. It's getting hot and humid here. Yeah, so that's fun. That makes going outside a wet experience. like, this is fun, right? We're
Not
having a good
wet,
time.
like not wet like running through the sprinkler. Wet like
Just
I don't know, like you were
sweat,
just
like a sauna, but you're fully
laying in a
clothed.
hot mud puddle. How hot does it get down there?
It doesn't, it's not the heat that gets too bad. Like it'll get, I don't know if it ever gets up to like 100, but it'll get like the mid 90s
Oh yeah.
a lot, but then you'll have the humidity that's like the other day it was like 83%, and that's
Yeah.
high. Yeah. So it's just, I'm starting to adapt to it a little bit. Like if you just kind of expect like, okay, if I'm going to be outside, I'm just going to be kind of sticky and sweaty, and that's just the way it's going to be, like if I mow the lawn or something, it's like I come in just soaked through my shirt. But if you kind of just go into it expecting that and, whatever, it's not terrible. It's not the most fun thing, but it's all right.
I'm sure it's different coming from Boise's super arid
Right.
surroundings. And
like if you get to like 30% humidity up there, it's like, whoo, man, what is
we have
going
one
on?
we have one muggy day and we're like it's so hot.
And honestly, there are days here where I'm like, man, it feels really like drier. It's not near as bad. It's really nice. And I'll look and it'll be like 62, 65% humidity. And that's like, oh, this is nice.
Well, it's a good thing you don't like cardio because you probably can handle some weight training in that humidity versus like going for a run out there, right?
Yeah. Well, and
or am I off base?
No, you're right. But inside, I mean, everything's pretty dry. But like
yeah.
Kathleen will go, she went for a run last night at like 7:30. I was just like, oh, God bless you. Have fun with that. Because,
she's
of course,
dedicated.
she doesn't sweat as easily as I do. So it'd be a different story if I did it. Right.
She sparkles a little
Comes
bit.
back still looking all cute. Like, oh,
I know.
It'd just be like, ugh, like my face is halfway melted and just soaked. And yeah.
That's a great visual.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Between that and the one of me just in my shirt and socks. I'm really giving people some good mental images.
What's next? Nothing to hide.
Who knows?
Michael has nothing to hide. So what are we talking about today besides visuals of you?
Besides visuals of me. Sustainability and long-term health, lifelong health, that kind of thing. I think, we've addressed some of this stuff before, but I think the idea of is something sustainable for long-term is a question I would say most people never ask themselves when they're making an attempt to be healthier or lose weight or whatever, right? I don't think that's for most people ever even a question, because there's no what about a year from now. It's like right now, I've got to do something right now. And I think that speaks to how most people start an attempt. I think most people, it's like a desperation, like they come to they get to a place of where like, I've got to do something because they're so unhappy with the way they feel or the way they look, or, blood lab levels, or, something. It's like, I've got to do something. I mean, that's how most of my conversations start with clients. It's just like, I'm fed up with this, or this, I'm here. This is the heaviest I've ever been, or, this kind of stuff, that it's just like a place of like, I've got to do something now. And I think that feeds into why so many like fad diets are so popular for people, because it promises this quick and immediate and, that kind of thing. But sustainability is so key to doing things long-term, I think, because like we've talked about before, I've never had a client say, I'd really like to lose 20 pounds and then in 6 months gain it all back. Exactly. But that's how we set stuff up. For just like, I'm just going to get to the place. And then once I get to the place, I have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because I haven't even thought about it.
Yeah. And I think people, like you mentioned, that kind of spark that people get, that moment when they decide this is enough. Like I've had enough. It's time for me to make a change. And I've seen the same thing with like smoking cessation. So when people decide, it really is a decision. Like I'm done. I'm going to, go in this different different direction, make some changes. We talked about goal setting last time. And I think that is a key to kind of thinking a little bit more long-term versus, I mean, that spark of like motivation is really important because that's what kickstarts us into a change. And I mean, that might keep you going for a week or two, or even a little more as you get, started on some lifestyle changes, but that loses its luster after a period of time. And if you haven't set some goals and kind of thought about this a little bit more longer term and looked at different aspects of your life, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this podcast, the different aspects of wellness. I think those things can really play a role in how does this equate to a lifestyle change, or how does this equate to like a long-term change versus just this spark of motivation that's going to get me going for, 2 or 3 weeks.
Right. Yeah. What are you going to do when you don't want to? Because if someone is acting from a place of desperation or being fed up, or even just really motivated by a video they saw or a friend who's lost, a bunch of weight or something, and they're like, all right, it's my time. Like, you're going to want to for a little bit because you have that, like, I'm keyed up and I'm ready to go. But at some point in the not too distant future, you're not going to want to,
Right.
And
it's
then
inevitable.
What? Yeah. And I know this is something we have planned to talk about in a later podcast to dive more in depth in, but just that idea of motivation versus momentum, right? But at some point, you're not going to want to. And if you don't want to, what's going to keep you going? Right. Or if it's been so, if which is really common, if people take steps to be healthier that are extreme, and they're white knuckling it, just trying to tick all the boxes throughout the day of, whatever they are. I didn't eat past 7. I didn't eat before 8. I ate 5 small meals. I didn't eat any fruit or sugar or, just all these things. What happens when you're just tired of white knuckling it? Right? Like, now what?
Yeah.
Well, sorry. One more thing. I'll tell you now what. And most of you listening probably know now what, because you've been there over and over and over, right? It's the yo-yo. It goes up and down, up and down, up and down. And I'm tired and I'm exhausted and I can't keep, I'm barely hanging on. And then it all falls apart and screw it. I'm just tired of doing this. It's just ruining my life right now, And so abandon everything, and all the weight or more comes back. And then in a year, we get the courage again, or we watch the motivating video, and all right, this time I'm going to do it. And here we are in this awful, vicious cycle with no sustainability, no long-term progress, often no progress at all, because I mean, I've had a bunch of clients who have throughout their lives have lost a lot of weight and gained it back, and a lot of weight and gained it back multiple times. And it's like, where'd you get to?
Yeah.
Like, has any progress been made?
I think something that we've talked about, so just because you mentioned the yo-yo effect, and when we think of yo-yo, I think yo-yo dieting tends to be the term that will pop in people's heads. We've talked about kind of your long-term why, or your underlying why for the lifestyle change. And I think that is a really important factor for people to identify. And just, I mean, it's not something you can just answer, if Michael or I says, what's your why? It's probably not something you can just articulate on the spot. It might be something you have to think about and kind of dig into, and really probably access that deeper emotional, existential side of your life, and really think about what is it that really is motivating you to make these changes. And I would say that is probably what will keep you going when the yo-yo starts happening.
Right.
So with weight loss, we know that despite all of our, efforts toward calorie counting or adjusting our diets or sticking to an exercise regimen, weight regain is almost inevitable for many overweight and obese individuals. And I would even say some normal weight individuals that are kind of in that, just very healthy and typical weight range. If you lean down too much, it's not sustainable. Your body is kind of geared toward getting, and we can talk maybe later about set point theory and all that stuff that comes into weight loss. But I think when people start experiencing that weight regain, number one, know that it's not like a failure, and it's not a signal that you just need to like throw everything out the door. What I would encourage people to do, and what I've had conversations with clients on, is let's refocus on all of the other things that are making this effort worthwhile to you. Why do you continue to work out? Why do you continue to eat well? Why do you continue to cook with your family instead of, relying on just easy convenience foods, whatever it is? Getting really clear on that why, and drawing on that when some of the other motivating factors like weight loss are not working in your favor, I think that can really help sustain that behavior, because we know that people are healthier if they are physically healthier and emotionally, mentally healthier if they are physically active, regardless of what happens with weight. We know that people are physically healthier if they eat quality food, regardless of what happens with weight. So thinking about why those things are important to you and how they help in other aspects of your life's health balance, I think will help make them sustainable.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think there's got to be a shift, right? Like from if someone's engaged in one of these more extreme attempts, and when it's like, I can't do this anymore, like what you're talking about, like let's focus on some of these other things. I think that's got to happen. I also think it's really important that people stop making attempts in these insane, extreme ways. Like what if you just, I think we've probably talked about this almost every episode. Like, what if you did things in a way that wasn't awful? Like, what if you did things in a way that wasn't miserable and didn't like disrupt your entire life? Like, what if you did that? Because, back to what I was saying earlier with that whole yo-yo thing, like, let's say someone's made 6 attempts over 6 years and they wind up, they're 10 pounds heavier than they started 6 years ago. That's not an unlikely situation at all. At all. In fact, even more weight, 20, 30 pounds is pretty reasonable, I think. And so all you've done really in those 6 years, as far as your weight goes, is put on 30 pounds. And you've made some really hard, disrupting, difficult attempts. What if over those 6 years, you did things moderately, right? You just made some small changes. Like, how different would your life be?
Boring. That's boring,
right?
Michael.
It is, right? Like, do this for 6 years. Guess what? Newsflash, sorry to tell everybody, whatever you do, you're going to have to do it for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Oh man. And that's so heavy, isn't it? Like when people come to me and we have this conversation, I think a lot of times they're really wanting that like immediate, like the diet plan, the exercise plan, the plan. Give me the plan. This is the thing to do. But then when we start working on it, it becomes clear through our conversations that this isn't just a plan for the next 30 days, 60 days, the next 6 months, whatever. This is something like we're putting into place things that are really important to the individual that will keep you going for, these are lifestyle changes and those are lifelong. I mean, that's really hard for people to wrap their heads around. And that's why when you have those extreme diets that say something like, gosh, don't eat fruit because it has a lot of sugar. I mean, geez, Louise. And so what? People can't enjoy strawberries in the summertime anymore, like for the rest of your life? Or if you do, that's bad or that's against the rules. It's just those kinds of things don't speak to sustainability.
Not even close. Yeah. Well, and I don't know if I've said it on here. I've said it before. But just that saying of you dance with the one that brought you. Have I said that before on here?
I think so.
I don't know. But just, typically whatever approach gets you to where you are, you're going to have to keep doing. You can pivot and make those shifts. It's difficult and challenging, I think, but most likely you're going to have to kind of keep doing these same habits and behaviors that got you there. And so if it's hard for 3 months, it's going to be really hard for 30 years,
Yeah.
And and sometimes people are like, well, that's a long time. It's like, you have to think about things in these terms. You have to.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get to only think about a month or two or three or this summer or that wedding. Like you can't just think about that stuff, because if you do, like most people do, what do we see? They don't work out at all. They inevitably crash, they fall apart. People are frustrated. They reaffirm these false beliefs that I just can't do it. I'm not worth it, whatever. I'm not the type of person that gets to have X, Y, and Z, right? And just super like discouraging situations. It's like you have to think about the rest of your life. You have to. And
Yeah.
people always talk about lifestyle changes. It's funny how often clients throw out, well, I know it's about lifestyle changes. And it's like, okay, but what does that mean to you? Because a lifestyle change means changing your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And setting up like behaviors that you can do until you die
Yeah.
forever. Like
Yeah.
for the rest of
It's,
being you, we want
it's
to
getting
do these
heavy.
things.
It's getting heavy.
But you know what I mean though? Like it's just like you have to. You have to. And
Well,
so often these attempts don't even think about, past 2-3 months.
yeah. And I think, what you said about like, oh, having a wedding or a certain date or a certain period of time. I think some of those intermediate benchmarks can be useful for people.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think there is such thing as someone kind of kickstarting a change
Mhm.
by saying, okay, I am just not going to, I don't know, I'm not going to drink beer for the month of January or whatever it is. I'm not going to default to fast food for lunch for, this amount of time. I think sometimes you can impose those really very specific rules on yourself so long
Mhm.
as you are the one that's imposing it. It's not like some external like
Right.
guru telling you this is what you should do. This is
Right.
something you've chosen and seems to work with a lot of things in your life.
Mhm.
But then also, what happens after that period of time?
Right.
What happens after the wedding? What
Mhm.
happens after the class reunion?
Yeah. What's the exit
And
strategy?
yeah.
Yeah.
And hopefully by then, so one thing I'll work with clients on is not just the like specific, foods or, diet structure or whatever, but we'll talk about like the less tangible aspects of success. How
Mhm.
are you feeling? What have you noticed? Um, I've had clients that come back to me and they're like, I found that I actually really enjoy this new, they switched up their breakfast and they started
Mhm.
adding, because something that I like to challenge people to do is eat vegetables at breakfast, because
Right.
that's a hard one for
Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
And people have found that they'll make a breakfast with veggies and they're like, I actually really like this. And this is something that has come out of it that I will use for the rest of my life because I enjoy it. And
Right.
that has nothing to do with the number on the scale, really,
Mhm.
or the size of dress they're putting on or whatever.
Mhm.
So some of those less tangible aspects of the process, and I think that's what a lot of this comes down to, is really embracing the process of change
Right.
rather than like just focusing on that end game.
Right. Because the process is everything. Like the process is the only thing, right? Like I mean, there's like what's the word? Um, effects from the process. Like we do the
Uh-huh.
process well, yeah, we could lose weight. We can get off medications. Maybe we fit in clothes we haven't been able to fit in. Like, and those are fantastic things. But at the same time, the process is really kind of everything, because you don't get to anywhere without the like you don't get to any destination without doing the journey, right? And then like the journey, let's say you're going on a trip, well, like while you're there, that's rewarding and it's
Mm-hmm.
fun and everything, but there's still journey after that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you got to come back home, you got to go through life, you got to, it's just like most of this whole thing is journey. Like there
Yeah.
are some awesome rewards and things that you get from it, but it's day in, day out, just doing what you know to do, taking better care of yourself. And if you don't like honestly just kind of fall in love with the journey and fall in love with the process of finding value in, and I think we talked about this 1 or 2 episodes ago, just like doing the work for the sake of the work, right? Like if you don't find value in the process just because the process has value, right? Like I'm worth eating a vegetable in this meal for, right? I'm worth, like it's worth it to me to go, you know, I'm full enough. I don't need more. I'm good. Or I'm going to go for a walk after dinner cuz it's just there's value to me in going for a walk after dinner and moving my, like if those things don't matter, ugh,
Yeah.
it's, if all there is the big wins, it's going to be
Right.
tough, and you're probably not going to see many of those big wins.
And that's so hard for people to
Mhm.
embrace those just my husband Matt likes to say wax on, wax off. He
Mhm.
said that to me all the time during training when I would go out, because a lot of my training would just be like, you go out and get it done. Like just you go do a 45-minute run, you just go do a 2-hour bike ride, whatever, without a lot of structure to it. And a lot of,
Mhm.
some of those workouts, you're hitting big marks and paces and numbers, and it's super motivating because you're like, yeah, I'm getting stronger. But then a lot of those workouts are just wax on, wax off. You just go out and do it. And it's just that consistency. And there's
Mhm.
nothing like sexy and glittery and exciting about it. It's just you go out and do it, and you do it because of whatever you tell yourself.
Yeah.
What's the story you tell yourself about that process? Why is it important to you?
Right.
Um, I'm thinking about a client that I had when I was doing a corporate wellness contract years ago. And she was, I believe, early 60s. She had diabetes. And her first appointment with me, I can remember she came in and if for those who are listening, I'm crossing my arms and I'm kind of sitting further back away. So I'm just like in this defensive kind of mode. And,
Prove yourself.
I know.
Go ahead,
So
prove yourself, lady.
I
That's what
know
she's thinking.
exactly. And whenever I'm met with that kind of body language, I acknowledge it right away. And
Mhm.
I kind of inside my own head, I'm like, okay, this person, obviously she's been diagnosed with diabetes for several years now. She's in her 60s. I have to operate from knowing she's the expert in her life, and that anything I'm going to tell her, she probably has heard before.
Mhm.
So let's take a different approach. So I usually open it up with, you know, what do you want to talk about? Where, I'm assuming this isn't the first time you've sat down with somebody like me. So tell me what you've heard before. Tell me where you're at. And she shared that she's done everything to control carbs. She's done all of these things to control her diabetes, and nothing has resulted in A, weight loss, B, sustainable hemoglobin A1C change, which would be like the long-term look at your blood sugar control, right? And also, none of it has stuck. None of it has been enjoyable or sustainable for her. And she's made several attempts, and she just had, and part of the problem with this was the company I was working for kind of made it almost compulsory for the employees to come see me if their metrics were a certain, right? So if their weight was a certain
Uh,
level, if I know, bad
Yeesh.
news, right? So
Yeah.
then you're already getting a little resistance if people have to come see. I'm like the principal and they got to come sit with me.
Right.
So she was already just, defensive about just things she had been told, and rightfully so, because she
Mhm.
had been making several attempts and nothing stuck. And that first meeting with her, I basically just asked her what she was willing to try. Like what are some things she knows would be good for her that she's not doing? Like let's just set the weight, the blood sugar control, everything else, the carb counting. Let's just set that all aside. What's something you know that you would like to be doing for yourself? And she chose physical activity. Well, I know that I can, I should be walking more, I should be doing this. So we kind of just started with like some easy walking. Well, this was like in the fall, so soon the weather turns bad. And then she turns to like, well, there's a gym, just up the hill from my house.
Mhm.
I think I'm going to, choose that. And so she started doing that. And through the winter months, she became she had a really interesting, like, very disciplined kind of personality. So it struck me that she had never really stuck to any of these changes before.
Mhm.
I think it was because they felt like imposed, like something she should be
Sure.
doing, something she was told to do,
Mhm.
and she didn't feel like she was successful at it. So she kind of dig her heels in and be like, well,
Sure.
I'm not going to do that, you know?
Yeah.
So this came much more from a place where she had chosen to do these things. And then she started coming in, and I would see her like every couple weeks. She'd come in and report like certain dietary changes she was making with her husband. She started telling me that she was going on walks with her grandkids on the weekends because she wanted to go, you know, for a walk, and the kids were all excited about it. So she'd go do that. Then
Mhm.
she started walking to the gym up the hill.
Mhm.
And she came in one day and she was just like, I'm so excited. She knew that she had been losing weight, and it just
Yeah.
happened. I mean, I say that like, oh, it, you know, snap your fingers. But really, it happened because
Mhm.
she focused so much more on the process
Mhm.
and what she was doing each day and why that was important to her. The physical
Right.
activity became important because it was a way she started seeing she was engaging with her grandkids. Her husband, who was like not into walking, um, started walking with her in the evenings because she was going to do it regardless. And he was like, well, I want to spend time with you, so I'm going to go for a
Mhm.
walk with you. So then her husband got on board, and she came in and she was so excited. She's like, Erin, my husband went for a walk with me. And that just does not happen. And so
Yeah.
he started adopting some of these changes too. And it was, I mean, I think I saw her for a little over a year. And in the end, her A1C came down, her weight came down, her dietary habits just gradually shifted toward, I think, something that was more not only sustainable but conducive to, you
Mhm.
know, her A1C control. But then she also found the joy in the physical activity, and just to see her face light up, that for me was the big eye opener, knowing
Yeah.
that she wasn't just doing this because she needed to lose weight or because she needed to control her diabetes or because somebody told her to do it.
Mhm.
She found the small, again, the process, the small steps, the small goals, seeing if she could. And then she started feeling the difference. And then she started really internalizing, this is who I am now. And this
Mhm.
is what I do. And her family started recognizing that new identity and kind of feeding it a little bit more. So
Mhm.
it was a super cool transformation. And just
That's
seeing her
awesome.
come in glowing was like,
Yeah.
that was all I needed. You know, it was
Yeah.
exciting.
Well, and I think that's fantastic, and I love stories like that because it's when people really take ownership of their health, right? Like this is my responsibility, and
Mhm.
so I'm going to take charge of that. Versus like anything healthy is like it's only a means to an end, right? Like eating vegetables is just a thing that's in the way of losing 20 pounds. And exercising is just this hurdle I've got to get through to get to there. And it's just like all these healthier behaviors are really problematic, right?
Mhm.
They're like the pain in the butt kind of thing that we just have to go through versus, and again, I think we talked about this a couple episodes ago. Like if the behaviors only exist to meet the outcome, then when we can't see the outcome getting closer, the behaviors have no purpose,
Yeah.
right? Versus like your story of your client. If when she found like I just like going for a walk, I feel better when I eat these things. Like these things are worth doing because they're worth doing.
Mhm.
And that's it. It's not just about the other thing. And so when we put all of our attention on, I like these things because I feel better doing these things, and I'm finding that I'm valuable and I have worth, and these I'm worth doing these things, then those outcomes so often take care of themselves because we're diving headfirst fully into the work versus diving headfirst into the outcome and going like, all right, just cross these things off because this is all it's
Exactly.
going to get me there. And it's just a
Yep.
whole different approach, but it's man, it's so important to just fall in love with the process and find value in it.
So I just remembered one more thing about that story.
Yes.
She and her husband would play tennis together,
Mm-hmm.
and they would just go to like their local, you know, whatever club, and they'd kind of bat the ball back and forth until they both got tired or achy, and then they'd, you know, call it. Well, as she started going to the gym and just doing some light strength training And I shouldn't say light, because there were times when she was like, oh yeah, I could do more weight here. So she was kind of incrementally pushing it and, getting there, and just being more active. She could play longer. Not only that, she was kicking her husband's ass in tennis. And I that might have been why he wanted to go for block walks with her too. Like, okay, maybe I should try this. I know. So that competitive edge. But she was excited about that too. So she started seeing these other benefits unfolding in front of her eyes that she didn't expect and that she wasn't aiming for. But also, if you start paying attention to those things and building awareness around what are some other benefits of this that I'm realizing. And I mean, there are probably, for any of our listeners, I would challenge you to kind of take a pause and think about some of the ways, and we'll talk, maybe this is a good time to talk about the aspects of wellness. So you can kind of tease out some of those things.
Yeah. I want to say one more thing before we get into that.
Go for it.
And I think just your illustration of your client, it really speaks to the importance of moderation. And something that I say a lot is that healthy choices tend to breed healthy choices, right? And I think a lot of times we've talked about this, people start out with like, I'm doing these 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 changes. Like I'm doing all these things, right? And it just kind of falls apart. Versus when people are like, okay, I'm doing these 1 or 2 things and I'm going to do them well. What I often see, and I'm guessing you do too, is like the next time you check in, if those things are going that well, they're like, yeah, and I've kind of started doing this too, and this, and because it just seemed like it kind of went with it, or it was just easier to, do prep work for all my meals at one time. And so I just did that, versus the 2 we talked about, or, we were already out walking. So instead of 10 minutes, we just went for 20, and it's like, it starts to build. And that's going back to that motivation momentum thing. Like that's how we build momentum. And then it's a lot easier to embrace. Maybe there's 5 or 6 things that they're kind of working on actually, right? But only a few are the goal. Only a couple are being measured, so we can't fail at these other things, right? But they just kind of start like, I'm just kind of doing this too. And well, it wasn't too bad to do that. So I figured, and these small things become huge things, because we're proving to ourselves, oh, I can do this. And I think a lot of times people come into these attempts with like, okay, I don't know if I can do this. Like, here we go. And then they're set up in a way where we're kind of constantly proving to ourselves, I don't think you can do this because this is really freaking hard,
Exactly.
Versus when we start smaller, it's like, oh yeah, I can do this. I can probably do some more things because I'm proving to myself I'm able to do this, which is something a lot of people don't have evidence of. They don't have evidence they can do this because their attempts are set up in such a way that they can't.
Yeah.
So
that's all.
That's all. That's all I wanted to say.
Michael's done.
We can move on now. Yeah, I'm good. Out of here. Finish up.
I actually have a little bit of a question or maybe a discussion point on that, because I think the reverse can happen too, where people find this sustainable change that they've made and they're kind of rolling along and things are working really well, and life happens, right? You have a change in job, or you move, or you have a baby or whatever, and slowly the needle starts moving back into the opposite range, like the kind of the default that you did before, the changes. I have seen that happen with people where they think oh my gosh, this is working. I've made these changes and I've realized the benefits and it's sustainable. I've been doing it for years, but then things kind of regress. Have you seen that? And do you have how do you address that with people?
The way I do that is like, okay, let's dive into what has changed that's making these things that were easier more difficult. Right? Like let's troubleshoot, basically. That's how I approach it. Versus like, I think it could be easy to be like, well, just, make it a priority and just kind of buckle down and do these things. Like there's a reason that things that were going well aren't. And so what is it? Is it that you get home later because of the new job? Or is it that you have less evenings at home because you have 2 kids that are now in soccer? Or, is a spouse working later and they would always help you with cookie, like what's going on, and then let's adapt around those things, right? Like let's be flexible. Like again, we've talked about before, like we've got to be able to turn that dial down sometimes, or sometimes just go, let's do a different dial, right? Let's because maybe some things have changed so much that to do the same things, we need a whole different kind of strategic approach, and sometimes it's like, okay, we can't really adjust or tweak what we were doing because that's just not going to work well with the way things are. So let's do some other things. Let's figure out some other strategies that are going to set you up for success with these new kind of demands and issues that you have.
Yeah, and I like that, and I would totally agree that kind of reassessing the whole situation. Another really good segue into what I promise we'll get to. We'll talk to the aspects of wellness, but we're having some good discussion. I think it's also important for people to look at, is this whatever barrier or factor in my life that's affecting my healthy initiatives, or the progress I was making? Is this factor temporary? So is it a project at work that's just demanding my time? Am I taking care of an extended family member for a couple months and then it will end, or whatever? Or is this like a long-term lifelong thing that you have to readjust? I think a lot of times people will again, back to that whole I'm failing, or I need to change me, or I need to buckle down and do better, rather than taking a look at all of this situation and deciding if there's something you need to do differently with prioritizing time or the situation, instead of just being harder on yourself and chastising yourself for not being able to do it all. I should be able to do it all. And people do that, right? They shoulda all over themselves because they haven't been able to like do it all.
Yeah.
And something I think of, I've mentioned Matt a few times, but I have a lot of admiration for him when he works really, really hard in his job. And he plays a key role that he knows is really integral to the success of his company. And he recognizes when he'll even come home and say, this isn't sustainable. Like there are periods of his work where he's like, this isn't sustainable. What's happening right now isn't sustainable. And I think that's a really powerful statement, because he's not saying, I suck, I can't, I just have to do better, I just have to work more, I just have to stay later. He's not internalizing it like I have to, work harder or be better, or I should be able to do this. He's turning it into, okay, this is not sustainable, like very objective. What's happening right now? There's just not enough time in the day. There's not enough mental energy for, there's not enough me to go around to be a whole person and to be successful in all of these areas. So when you look at it like that, that's when you can start identifying, okay, what are the pieces, like you were saying, what are the factors that are at play here? Where are the priorities falling, and where are kind of the barriers or the catches hitting people, and how do we start adjusting those things, rather than you just telling yourself you suck and I should be able to do it.
Right. That's really good. I like that a lot. That's really good. And it makes me, okay, so I have 2 points, and then we can get to the aspects of wellness. One, I think I really like that a lot, because
well, thank you.
It puts the problematic piece on the approach and the way things are set up versus on ourselves, right? And I think that's where so many people put the blame is on themselves. And I think just the truth is, if it's not working for you, then we need to do something different. It's not, and this is what I hate about fad diets, is they make the assumption that they're going to work for everyone. You just have to figure out how to fit within that.
Totally.
Right?
Yes.
And if you can't, then you just need to try harder, or you need to figure out something and it's just, that's not the way it works. You're not the problem. Your approach is. And if your approach isn't working, no matter how simple or complex or whatever, and not comparing anyone else's approach or what they did or didn't do, right? Because this has to be about you. If it's not working, you need to do something different.
Yep.
That's it. Not you're broken. or you're not worth it, or you don't deserve it. It's none of that crap. It's no, we just
Mhm.
need to do something different because you're unique. And so we have to figure out all the unique little, bits and pieces that, we need to take into account and figure out something that works for you,
Yeah,
you
and
know?
how much of the fitness and diet industry focuses on
Oh my
like
God.
guilt and like you need to have a beat down and this needs to be like hard on you and in order for you to succeed. Like I'm
Yeah.
the opposite. I mean, I ascribe to a little bit less of a Jillian Michaels approach to things.
Right. Yeah. It's really frustrating. And I think it's probably one of the most frustrating aspects of what I do, that I see in the day, but also I think a really important role that I fill, and I'm sure it's the exact same for you, is that counter message of, I
Yeah.
know you've heard this over and over and over, and it's truth to you, but I'm going to speak something different to you. And we're going to talk about this in different ways. And then we're going to make some attempts in ways that are going to set you up for success, to be like, oh, okay, maybe there's something to this. And we're going to begin to push back against all this BS that is just like loaded on people with how it should look like, what the process is like, how quickly it should happen, whether or not you should enjoy it, just all that crap. And we're going to start to push back on that. And I think it's so frustrating and disheartening every time a client comes and just has this record of quote unquote failures,
Hmm.
and this just almost like hesitancy to even try again, because like, I just don't know that I have it in me to try and fail. I don't know that I can do that again. It's really disheartening and discouraging, but it's also like, all right, here we go.
Yeah.
We get to do some
Yeah.
different work and some good work and some life changing, sustainable work, you know, and that's really exciting too. But
And don't you think that you play a vital role in allowing, like giving permission
mhm,
for people to like reassess how they're approaching something? Because I'll hear that a lot, especially working with athletes. A lot of athletes are type A. I should be, it's like a formula. I do XYZ and I get here. Where there's not a lot of self-compassion and there's not a lot of like
right.
showing yourself some grace and kind of adjusting and approaching things versus like just you have to be on, you have to tick all the boxes and hit all the marks. So a lot of times people often rely on someone like you or I or a coach or another mentor of some kind to grant them permission to just say, okay,
Hmm.
we're going to kind of adjust course here a little bit. And,
Hmm.
seeing from the outside looking in that there needs to be a little bit of a different approach to this.
Hmm.
So for example, with like the extreme diets and the weight loss, if somebody is coming to me telling me that it's not, they usually don't say it's not working. They
Hmm.
usually tell me that in a roundabout way, and describe
Right.
all of the things that are really hard about it. And then they'll
Yeah.
turn around and say like, but I just need to try, I should be able to do this, I'll just work harder, I should do this and blah blah blah. And
Hmm.
I'll usually be like, okay, what I'm hearing from you is this and this and this, it's not quite working, what if we tried this approach? And
Hmm.
sometimes just hearing it from the quote expert, even though
Right.
they're the expert in their lives, we're maybe the fitness or diet experts,
Right.
um, suddenly gives them permission to, oh, okay, so maybe I don't have to, whittle my carbs down to 50 grams a day or something
Hmm.
crazy.
Yeah.
Erin or Michael says it's okay to kind of approach it this way, so maybe I will.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so that self-compassion can be helpful.
Yeah. And I think just sort of like seeking, this is something I do with clients, but I think just also for, anyone watching or listening, that you can just do with yourself too, is ask yourself why. Like if I have a client, it's like, well, I'm not going to eat fruit. I'm scared to eat fruit, or I haven't been eating fruit, or whatever. It's like, okay, why? What's the reason? Well, I heard, that sugar is so high, and that kind of stuff. Da, 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 da. And and then to just kind of follow that up with like, does that make sense to you? Does that seem like it resonates with what you know fruit to be? You know?
Hmm.
And most of the time, it's like, well, no, it seems kind of stupid to me. that like an apple is going to be, detrimental to my health, or a banana, right? And so
Oh,
if you can cut,
bananas.
ooh,
So much starch in those
that
bananas.
whopping 100 calories in those bananas, like, yeah. But like, so why do you think this? And does that seem to make sense to you? Do you feel like that's a valid thing? And sometimes it is. Sometimes people are really entrenched in what they've heard and that kind of stuff, that it just really feels like, yeah. But to me, that's rare. To me, what is more common is like, well, I've heard it so much that I'm really hesitant. I know that's probably stupid, but I'm not ready to like just dive in with fruit.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Then we don't have to dive in with fruit, you know? But what if we did a little bit? What if we had a few fruits a week, and just begin to see that, oh, I can make progress, and I can add some of these things that I've been kind of fearful of, but I'm still making progress.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how do you feel when you eat fruit? Do you like fruit? Does it satisfy some, like, a sweet tooth for you? You know, um, and then begin to educate them on like how like foods really work in our bodies and how calories work. And, like it's really important, like our overall intake. That's what really matters, you know, and just begin to kind of educate them and turn that ship a little bit, but I think asking yourself that why, like, why do I hold this belief?
Mm-hmm.
And do I really feel like that's a valuable belief? I found most of the time people are like, yeah, I know it's stupid. I don't know why I have that. Or I've
Isn't
just
that
heard it so
funny?
much. Yeah. It's like not
Isn't
even
that
really a
funny?
belief. It's
I
just like a
know.
thing they think they're supposed
I
to think.
heard, yeah, but then it's actually really hard to undo that.
Oh,
And
yeah, it
and
is.
we'll talk a little bit more in a different episode about food beliefs and kind of that fear mongering that
Mm-hmm.
happens in the industry around certain foods. But it's amazing how often that happens where you confront somebody with, what are you afraid will happen if you
Mm-hmm.
do this, or where did that belief come from? What do you know about that to be true or not true?
Mm-hmm.
And you start investigating that, you'll get this kind of, well, okay, I know that that's probably not, the way it is, but
Yep.
and
Yep.
so it's interesting to see what's at play. And I think that can, kind of tie back to this whole sustainable changes thing, because a lot of times people are operating when they're doing maybe something extreme or like short term. They're kind of operating under this, well, I know this isn't quite the right way to do it, but I need to do it. I need to do it
Yep.
this way. I know that keto is not, you know, sustainable long term, but I need to do it. I just want to try it. Um, those whole like, I know, but
Mm-hmm.
statements,
A lot
I
of
think
buts.
need to be challenged, and addressed.
Yeah.
So,
Nope. I completely agree.
before we keep going on, on some of these
Wait, one more
little
thing.
tangents, I know Michael's got something else.
Actually,
Um,
I did have something else, but I'm going to save it. So,
oh, are you sure?
well, I think so.
Remember what happened last time? You tried to save something. You were like, "Oh, it's gone."
But I got it back.
You did get it back. 'Cause,
I was going
yeah.
to save it for a different episode. Okay, I'll say it real quick, and then for real, we'll get into these aspects of health. And I don't want to
Okay.
borrow too much because we do have an episode planned talking about like how do you know if a fitness or wellness professional is really worthwhile, right? I think when we're talking about like we've had these sort of like things imposed upon us of like, yeah, I can't eat fruit, or I can't eat after 7, or I can't. I think it's really important when you hear those messages to look at the person you're hearing them from, right? The expert or whatever. And is their business, their entire way of them making money based on you believing this thing, right? Like if I'm a keto guy and I think everyone should do keto, right? Then I have to propose and promote keto, right?
Mhm.
One, for my business. Two, just for the sake of like, I need to reaffirm that what I'm doing is the right thing. Right. And so I've got to just buy into this sort of like blindly. And otherwise, like the whole thing I'm doing here is at risk. And if someone's business is built on a belief or two, to me, that's a big red flag.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's like, okay, so they can't do anything counter to those things. So they've really pigeonholed themselves into these beliefs. And so as more evidence comes out that, hey, maybe that's not the case, they're going to shout louder and louder because they've really got to dig their heels in. And now they're being dogmatic about things. And like, this has got to be the only option because the way I pay my bills is based on this being the only option. So I think it's really important when you hear those things to look at like, okay, who's saying this and why are they saying this? You know,
Yes.
because a lot of times you'll go, oh, because they've got to, because they've designed their business in a way that they've got to. Okay, so maybe I take that with a big grain of salt, or maybe I don't take it at all, you know?
Yeah. And to tie it back to, when people look at a process for themselves that isn't working and they
Mm-hmm.
start shoulda all over, I should be able to do this. So and so did it and it worked for them. Why can't I do it?
Mm-hmm.
That's when maybe taking a look at that approach or that process isn't the right one for you, just
Right.
because this person maybe is telling you that this is the way it's done and this
Right.
is the best way. That might be, again, a red flag for you to kind of take
Right.
a look at that process. And it doesn't mean, I mean, some fitness professionals are very well intentioned and well meaning, and they truly believe, that their process is the best and the only
Mm-hmm.
one for people. um I don't ascribe to that.
Me either.
Am way more into the individualized approach,
Mm-hmm.
and also learning through my clients, because there is so much that I have learned from experiencing it through other people's footsteps and things that
Mm-hmm.
we've, approached differently with different people.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's get into the
Okay.
aspects of wellness, because I think this ties everything that Michael and I have been talking about this whole episode with, the individualized approach, embracing the process, being ready to readjust, and being, kind of flexible in your approach. When I was in college, I learned the 5 aspects of wellness, but the wellness model, gosh, I didn't look at the model before I started this episode, but I think it was in the 60s or something when
Yeah,
it first
sounds
came
right.
out. It was probably earlier
That's
than
good.
that. A lot of things
No one's
happened in
going
the
to look it
60s,
up.
right?
You're fine.
They might. Anyway, the wellness model operates off of, I like the 6-prong approach, because I think it encompasses all these aspects of people's lives that we can then kind of start examining individually. So
Mm-hmm.
there's physical wellness, which a lot of people will say diet and exercise, right? The physical body. There's spiritual wellness, emotional wellness, social, intellectual, and financial. Okay, so that's the 6. Physical, spiritual, social, intellectual, financial, and emotional. Did I say emotional already?
Yeah. Not sure.
So
I should have written them down too.
I know. I don't have it in front of me. I'm going off memory. But again, this is something, I mean, just like we've talked about other models with SMART goals and like the whole, how our habits formed, you don't necessarily have to just start picking apart your life into these buckets, but I think it can really help when you're looking at maybe why something isn't working in the world of health that you're trying to create for yourself. And I say the world of health because all of those aspects are super important.
Mm-hmm.
Michael and I are known for our expertise in physical health, right? Diet and exercise. But oh my gosh, if you haven't gathered by now that we talk a lot about emotional health and even financial health and,
Mm-hmm.
intellectual health, and having a balanced life in all of
Mm-hmm.
these different areas, I mean, that is what actually leads us to helping people identify what are sustainable changes they can make in
Mm-hmm.
the physical health. Or, maybe yoga would be a great option for somebody because it helps the physical health, but it also helps the spiritual, maybe
Mm-hmm.
the emotional side and all these other things.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I mean, I think, all of these things are so tied together, and you don't really even get to, I don't think, you really get to separate them out into like pure things,
Mm-hmm.
like that you don't get to look at just purely physical health. I think we try to a lot. I think that's the reason things are problematic a lot, is we try to just look at my physical health. Like if I'm looking at just my physical health, then I'm not looking at the way my life is set up, right? That does or does not work for me. And that I'm not looking at the like my emotional health and how I view myself, and are there beliefs I hold about myself that are going to actively work against me in losing weight or being healthier. I'm not looking at, my financial health. Can I afford this thing that I'm even embarking on? Like, okay, I have to eat all organic. Can I even afford that? Or is it going to like run me into the ground and I'm not going to be able to afford it? And then guess what? That's going to affect my emotional health. That's going to affect my intellectual health, right? Like, and all these things are so tied together that we don't really get to pull on one string without it affecting everything else.
Right.
But that's how we approach it, is I'm just going to do this thing. And I think, just another point on that is that I think we so often we don't realize that these other aspects of health are often the reason we're not physically healthy.
Totally.
Like if I have like some serious deep-seated beliefs about myself and my value and my worth and my place in this world, I'm going to have a hard time really being physically healthy, because I'm not going to do things in my life that support and bolster physical health, right? And if we don't address that, what are you going to do? And so I think I like the idea of listing these things individually, but I think they're also like all part of the same web. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they're just so like tied together. They're so enmeshed.
And that's why it's so important to take a look at all of these when we're talking sustainability. Because, I mean, how many times have you encountered a client that maybe had success with weight loss or fitness in the past? They got super ripped and lean, but then you start asking about the other aspects of their lives, and they're like, oh, well, yeah, I hardly went out. I didn't go see my friends because I was really controlling about how I ate, or I just stopped drinking so I wouldn't go to happy hours anymore. Or I've had clients that, because they are emotionally unwell and they're really struggling with their self-worth, like you said, they are not willing to put the time into themselves to be physically healthy, or to be socially healthy. Like they're so self-conscious that they won't actually go out with friends and have that social wellness. I've had, I actually had a client who struggled a lot with emotional eating. And when I found out that she had this very robust spiritual health aspect of her life, and she prayed a lot, she would hum hymnals to herself to calm herself, and she had like a lot of very powerful resources in that spiritual realm, we leveraged that to then help with some of that emotional eating, which then translated to not only emotional wellness, but also physical wellness. And it started translating to social wellness, because then she could go and join her Bible study group with food and tea cakes and all this other stuff around, and actually feel confident in that setting because of what we leveraged in the spiritual side. So
that's good.
It's really, interesting to watch these things interplay. And then there's like simpler examples. Like I had a client yesterday who's tried a new kind of pasta. And they're like, okay, it tastes good. Like I don't notice the difference between that and regular pasta. And nutritionally, I'm really interested what you think, but it's also really expensive. So do I need to be spending money on, and that can, add up quickly when people think they need to have all these specialty foods. All of a sudden their financial health is starting to kind of suffer, and they think that, oh, I need to spend all this extra money on all this stuff to be, quote, physically healthy, when, really that's not the case.
Yeah, for sure. It's just all so tied together, and I think it's really important when you're embarking on something to not just look at, can I do this, within the realm of my physical health, but like, how will it affect my emotional health? How will it affect my financial health? We've got to look at all these things. And we're really good at like just prioritizing physical health and like in an attempt at just discarding everything else, or even assuming that peak physical health doesn't affect these other things, right? Like, so for example, like being around a lot of bodybuilders in the gym I used to work at, like when these guys are getting ready for a show, they look phenomenal. I mean, they're so lean and sinewy, however you say that.
Yeah.
Like just like ripped.
Yeah.
And they come in and they are just dragging and their eyes are baggy.
They look vacant like Zombieland. And
they do. And they are miserable.
Yeah.
Miserable because they're sleeping like crap, because their life is so disrupted. There's so much stress on don't eat this. Don't you dare eat anything that's not on this plan because you will screw it up. Yeah. Right? They're sick and tired of eating the same thing over and over and over. Emotionally, they're just drained and exhausted. I mean, even intellectually, a lot of them get real dumb because their carbs are so low. You know what I mean?
So true.
And they're just like, I just feel so stupid. Like I can't think. I'm in a fog constantly. I can't go out and hang out with my friends, right? Like I have to only eat things that I've made at home. I can't just grab a burger or a beer or pizza with people. Like your social life is interrupted for months. But we look at those people and be like, wow, they really got it together. That's amazing. I'm surprised they can do that. It's like they can't. They can for a little bit, but they can't because everything else is falling apart. And it's a reason that you see someone go to a show, a week later you see them again, they're 10 to 20 pounds heavier.
Yeah.
Literally. Because the body's so depleted of fluids and nutrition, and it's easy to see those kind of situations or see someone on a magazine cover and be like, wow, I'd really love to look like that. Like, yeah, maybe you would if that was all that mattered. But when you know that that person is miserable and that 3 days later, they don't look like that anymore, right? And how disruptive it is, you wouldn't want that.
And I love that you just said, you use the phrase, if that's all that mattered. Because I think that is a really important thing for everybody to, take home with this conversation is sustainable changes allow for multiple things to matter in your life.
Yep.
That it doesn't have to be just all or none or one focus. Sure, there will be times when you focus very intently on a certain aspect of your life, whether that you identify that with the wellness model that we just talked about, or whether it's like a specific thing, whatever, a bodybuilding show or even a project at work or something like that. But understanding that that's not all that matters all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
Good stuff.
Cool. Yeah.
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 I like it.
Got kind of deep a few times there.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. We
Sorry
could lighten it up.
Everybody.
Yeah.
You want to do do you have any magic tricks or anything?
I don't.
Erin.
Oh man, I can't do
counting
anything
on you.
Cool. I know.
You do nothing cool.
Super square. Super
square
right here.
Man.
I'm a square. Yeah, I don't know.
I feel like that. I mean, that kind of covers everything I was wanting to cover, plus quite a bit. I feel like that was pretty comprehensive. So, I think we can kind of wrap things up.
Do you have a meaning in the mundane moment?
I do. And I planned it days ago. I was not just thinking about it recently during the recording of this podcast at all. Just in case you were wondering. Actually, I
always prepared. Yeah.
I'm so prepared.
So
basically a Boy Scout. No, it was I don't know how many days ago. 3, 4, 5. It was a little while ago. But it was, again, just with my girls, right? So my oldest daughter, Lila, is 9, and Sophie is 3.5, almost 4. She'll be 4 in September. So like 3 and 9 months or whatever. She's getting close to 4. But just watching like their relationship grow. And I mean, they still they fight and want to kill each other at times, right? And like are yelling at each other like siblings do. But when they're synced up, like that is like growing so much and growing so deep right now that they're really like the fighting is getting less and less, and they're
Yeah.
really just like becoming more buddies and playing with each other a lot more and that kind of stuff. Anyway, the other night, Lila wanted to read Sophie her stories for bedtime. And
Mhm.
so just seeing like Lila in the rocking chair, the big sister, and Sophie in her lap and reading the stories and Sophie fully engaged, it's just like, man, this is the coolest thing to see the big sister like really settle into like that sort of like, I'm going to care for you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to look out for you. I'm going to set aside what I want to do. Cause I'm sure she probably would have rather, been, watching some show or something before she went to bed, or, playing on her iPad for a little bit, while we were putting Sophie down or whatever. But Sophie wanted her to put her to bed. And so just watching her put herself aside, like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And then realizing, because I asked her afterwards, like, did you like doing that? She was like, yeah, that was really fun. You know,
Oh.
like just putting herself aside and realizing, like, oh, there's a lot of value in doing something for someone else because they want me to do it. And then I feel like that
Mhm.
was really rewarding. And I really like doing that. Just seeing that whole thing grow and develop it's just so cool. It's really,
Oh, that's
really
sweet.
neat. Yeah. Yeah. It was just a neat moment to see that.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
You have sweet girls.
Man, they are the sweetest. It's funny, they're so different. Like Lila's pretty, I mean, she can be wild, but she's pretty mild for the most part, and hilarious and like just so quick-witted. Um, and Sophie's just like just wild.
Handful.
But not in a naughty way. She's like not naughty.
No.
She's just like everything is turned up to 11 all the time. It's like this kid is so loud just all the time. And she's just wild and just, yeah, they're just both so fun. Like so different, but just a blast. Yeah,
Cool.
they're a lot of fun.
I like it.
What's yours?
Very good. Well, I'm still doing the trails challenge, and
Mm-hmm.
it's I'm getting there. I'm like 77% done.
Okay.
And I was wrecked this last weekend going out for a ride with Matt. And it's funny because I'm starting to realize that Matt's idea of, oh, this is a shorter ride, or this is the direction we want to do this trail, or, the climbs aren't that bad, is very different from my own,
Mm-hmm.
because it depends on the technicality of the trail and how exhausted I am. And on
Sure.
Saturday, we went out for a ride and I was like dragging. And it was one of those times when I wouldn't admit to myself that I was so physically exhausted that's why it was so hard. So I was just
Mm-hmm.
getting like super irritated and like bearing on the side of the trail as Matt would pass me, and I can't freaking do this. And of course, Matt's answer was, we probably should just go home and eat guacamole. That's what he said. He's a smart man.
That's a really smart response.
Isn't that the answer to almost anything?
It
So
should be.
I was aware that I needed an attitude shift on this ride. And I've had a lot of rides and runs and, training sessions like this where I'm just like physically wrecked. So then my mental space starts going down the drain, and it's not good because why am I out here doing this if I'm
Mm-hmm.
miserable the whole time? So we were riding along this trail, and I'm like in my head kind of saying, Erin, you gotta like reset here, and you've just got to like start. Usually what helps me is focusing on my surroundings, especially if I'm outside in nature. Like, tune into what you're hearing. Are you hearing birds? What's the breeze like through the grasses? What are you seeing?
Mm-hmm.
What's cool about what you're seeing? And I came around this corner, and there's a whole hillside that's just lit up with Indian paintbrush, that wildflower
That's
Indian
my favorite
paintbrush.
flower.
The funny thing is, when we were growing up, my parents would take us on drives and stuff around Idaho, just as a
Mm-hmm.
family, we'd go kind of check it out. And the only wildflower that we learned as children, because we didn't, I mean, my parents just didn't know a lot of the different wildflowers was Indian paintbrush. My mom knew it from when she was very little in Campfire Girls or whatever. So she'd point out the window, paintbrush, paintbrush, paintbrush. And so I came around this corner and all I thought was paintbrush, like this memory from my childhood. And it made me smile, and it made me like kind of laugh internally, because I mean, my mom is that type of person that she uses her humor to like just lighten. I mean, we all do as a family. That's kind of, if the going gets rough, you got to find something to laugh about or to just lighten it and, use humor. And that was kind of my springboard into, okay, this is like almost like, the universe giving me a sign that you need to lighten up here, and you need to just like, it triggered this childhood memory, and it just kind of made me laugh, and it was good.
Good. I like that a lot. That's good. I like just that being in the moment, like, what am I seeing? What am I experiencing? I think there's something
so hard
really,
to do sometimes.
It is, but it's so grounding when you do. Yeah. It's like it brings you right into just this moment, and all the worries and distractions kind of push out a little bit. I like that. That's really good. Cool.
Good stuff.
All right.
So we have been getting a lot of comments and even some questions and some feedback, and we appreciate all of it. So thank you so much for everybody who's listening and engaging with Michael and I. And we want to hear more. So please email us at middleish@gmail.com. You can, comment on our YouTube videos. You can, whatever, share it with people, leave us a rating on wherever you listen to your podcasts, and
subscribe.
Keep the feedback coming, please.
Yeah, we love it. We love it.
And we have a couple guests in the works, a tentative one for next podcast. So I'm not going to quite announce it yet. It'll be a surprise, but it'll be good fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everyone for watching and listening, and we hope you have a great week. Take care.
Thank you.